So before we begin, I would like to reflect and acknowledge the land we are on today. As a settler myself on this beautiful Turtle Island, since we are gathering with a platform from Sheridan Edge, I would like us to also acknowledge the traditional territories of the Indigenous nations that Sheridan College currently resides on, which is the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. For myself, I am currently in the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and I am very grateful and honored to be here with each and every one of you where the land has provided so much for me and my life. As I'm acknowledging this wonderful land that keeps me grounded, I also ask everyone here to also reflect on the traditional territory you are currently on and how much that land has provided to you and your life. How much this specific land has given life through the trees, the rocks, the water, such as a river, a lake, a creek, a body of water that is near you, the animals that also use this land. Acknowledge how much we take from this land and how it provides a home for you and your loved ones. What it has done for you and for those that have were here before, and what it will bring for those who are yet to come. So after the session today, I hope we all continue to acknowledge and reflect on the beautiful land we are on and how important it is to all of our well-beings. So Sheridan Edge is Sheridan College's entrepreneurship hub. We are a vibrant community of people from all backgrounds and walks of life who believe entrepreneurship can make lasting changes in society. We support change makers as they explore entrepreneurial approaches to creating a more equitable and sustainable world. At Sheridan Edge, we help founders grow ideas and ventures that support a triple bottom line approach. So people, planet, and profit. Profit refers to a venture's creation of material wealth, including financial income and assets. People refers to the quality of people's lives, such as the equity between people, community, and nations. And planet refers to protection and conservation of natural environments, such as tackling climate change and environmental sustainability. We offer mentorship, learning programs, inclusive community, and we have co-working spaces at two of the Sheridan College's campuses, which is the Mississauga campus and the Brampton campus. And we also look for opportunities to funding for you and your venture. We also connect Sheridan students to opportunities to learn and work with startups, and we collaborate with community partners to support impact entrepreneurs in the region. And something very exciting that's coming up in fall 2022 is that we have a membership model coming online. So if you are looking to belong to a community of change makers and inspiring entrepreneurs, attend virtual events like these and in-person events to help grow your network and skills, solve your startup challenges with your peers, and even access Edge staff advisors. It's going to be super easy to plug into what Edge has to offer. So if you are looking to learn more about this membership, I will be inserting a link into the chat to join our newsletter. So please do consider doing that. And without further ado, I'm going to move it on to Noreen, who will be introducing Ben.
Awesome. Thanks, Erica. Hi, everybody. So nice to be here. I work at Edge. I work in operations and I'm often behind the scenes, and I often work with partners as well. And so it's really thrilling to introduce Ben Walter today. He's the founding team member and the partnerships program manager at Pocketed, which is who you'll be hearing from today to tell you all about grant funding. And Ben currently manages a company's strategic alliance network composed of over 160 accelerators, incubators, professional associations, and B2B service companies across North America. And with over $150 billion available to North America. Sorry, are you able to hear me? I think I got muted.
Yes, so sorry, yes.
Where should I begin? Should I go to the top, or did you hear some of what I said?
We heard most of it.
Okay.
Noreen, I'd say that's a fantastic intro. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to take it over. Also, everyone can probably
Awesome.
tell I've had a haircut. So that guy on the screen, it is me, but it's got a new haircut, new style, looking fresh. Noreen, thank you so much for the warm introduction. Erica, thanks for kicking off the show today. And Marisol, thanks for being here as well to support. I am going to take over the screen share and we are going to kick things right off. I'm so excited to be here today, joining you in your evening hour to talk all about grant funding. And yes, today is called Leverage Grant Funding for Your Startup. We're going to dig right into it and really, share some intro details as well as some, executional and actionable details that you can use to get started if you haven't leveraged grant funding before. And I want to kick things off with just a quick overview, a bit of an agenda at what we're going to look at today. So we're going to start off with some Canadian grant basics, just the basics. Then we're going to hop into some grant misconceptions. So these are some things that I hear a lot, my colleagues hear a lot at Pocketed. We want to clear the air before you get started so that you can start confidently in your grant funding search. Then we're going to go into a couple of funding opportunities, a bit of a bonus section. We're going to cover some very common applications or programs that you may be interested in checking out. We're going to hop into how to prepare to apply. And then we're going to end the session off with actually looking at Pocketed as a tool to apply for grant funding. So I'm super excited to go through all this today. I just want to quickly say, and I know Erica said you can pop a question in the chat at any time. I want to encourage that. I want to make today's session somewhat interactive if we can. So if you have a question, please feel free to pop it in the chat at any point in time. You can even unmute yourself and go, hey, Ben, please shut up for a second. I have a question. And we will stop the session and we will address your question right away. I also have a little bit of time at the end where we can go through some questions if we weren't able to address those during the session content. So if you'd rather just kind of tune out and just really focus in on the content, then we can address those questions at the end as well. So that's what today's going to look like. And without any further ado, let's hop right into it. Now, I wanted to start today's session with like a really quick list overview of the funding types that are out there and are available to you as an entrepreneur, as a startup founder, as a business person, right? And I want to go through this just so you have a little bit of context and you can kind of compare grant funding relatively to these other opportunities that are out there and available to you. And all of these opportunities are great. These are great options to get some funding into your business. My favorite, of course, being grant funding. That said, at Pocketed, of course, we use some of these other methods as well, right? So it's important to kind of know where we're standing and what are all the options available to you. And so on the list here, we have a few things, right? We've got debt-based financing in the form of loans. We've got friends and family financing. We've got crowdfunding, and we have obviously investor funding, VCs and angels. And now these are all very, very common types of funding for your business, for your startup business. And I'll assume that all of you have somewhat of a base level knowledge of each of these, right? Now, the common theme with the 4 funding options that we have above grant funding, little sparkles there, is that in most of these funding opportunities, there is something that you will have to kind of give up in return for the funds that are coming into your business. So, for debt, for loans, obviously you're gonna have to pay that money back. You have to give up some collateral. For investors or for crowdfunding, you may be giving up some equity ownership in your business, right? So you're giving away kind of a chunk of that ownership that you have on day one or wherever you're at. With grant funding, it's very different. Talk about the structure of grant funding, but with grant funding, what you need to know is that it's very different than all these other funding sources because you're not having to give up anything like ownership or having to pay back these funds like you do, with friends and family, crowdfunding, these types of things. So very quickly, just a quick snapshot of the other options and opportunities that are out there available for you. Definitely worth considering, but we're going to focus on grant funding today. Now, I see the chat has gone off a little bit here. And so I'm just going to pop in really quickly before we hop into the first little bit of content here.
Right. Or the scan, okay. The MRI, one that
Hey, Collins, if you do have a question, the audio is a little bit off, so maybe if you could just pop that in the chat and I'll address that for you there. Just to confirm, the session will be recorded today. We're going to be talking about grants for everybody, NGOs to for-profit businesses. And then finally, yes, Aditi, Canadian grants are available to permanent resident card holders. You as a founder, it doesn't matter. You can actually, you don't even have to be a Canadian citizen as a founder, as long as you have a Canadian business. And so we can talk a little bit more about that, but you don't have to be a Canadian citizen as long as you have a Canadian incorporated and registered business and you're hiring Canadian citizens. So if you wanted to get funding to hire, then those folks would have to be permanent residents, Canadian citizens, or hold refugee status. So that's a great question to kick off our session with today. But we'll come back to some of these other questions. And as I said, Collins, if you do have a question, you can pop there in the chat. I actually have a question for all of you. So I expect the chat box is going to blow up here in a second. Have you used a grant before? Let me know in the chat. Yes, no, why, and just whatever is easiest for you. I want to know who here has used a grant. Okay, we got a lot of no's coming in here. Nabil, DT, no, no, no. Okay, Sean, you've applied for a grant. Maybe you'll have some good tips for some of the other folks in the room here from your own experience. Stephanie, not yet. Collins, yes, that's fantastic. Okay, great. So this is very typical, of what I see in our sessions. A lot of folks are brand new to grant funding. A few have applied to grants in the past. And what's great about our session today and, about using Pocketed as well is that it's really for the true beginners, the novices, the experts. Everyone can utilize Pocketed and everyone can get a little bit out of this session. It's going to help them feel more confident moving forward to secure their first grant or their second grant or their third grant. However many grants you've applied for in the past and successfully secured, we're here to help. And today's session will definitely help position you so that you can have success in that application process. So thanks everyone for your active participation so far. Now I'm going to take it back over and go through a little bit of content for you. So Canadian grants landscape. Let's look at an overview of the market. What does it look like? And what is out there that you can take advantage of? So the first thing I want to answer is, what are grants? And so very, very simply put, grants are a form of non-dilutive capital that's going to help you grow your business. Now, what does non-dilutive capital mean, right? What does that term mean? And here at Pocketed, we use that a lot, but I want to make sure that everyone understands what non-dilutive means. So non-dilutive really comes down to two things. It means that grants are going to be non-equity and non-debt capital. So we spoke about this a little bit when we looked at the different sources of funding that we can take advantage of. Non-equity means you are not giving up any equity ownership in your business. And this is very, very important, especially when we're in our early days, not to dilute too quickly, right? As we continue to bring on more and more outside rounds of funding into our business, we are going to further dilute our equity ownership. And so the more equity that we can retain up front, and utilizing grant funding to get that funding, but retaining our equity ownership is fantastic because it gives us more leverage and more opportunities as we move down the line and we begin to engage with VCs and angels and these types of individuals, right? So non-dilutive means non-equity. It also means non-debt, right? So like we spoke about with loans, maybe friends and family, you do not have to pay this money back. And that means you're also not collecting any interest on this money, right? You're bringing in this money. It is there for you to use for the projects that you're executing, but you do not have to return it to any third party that is lending you or loaning you these funds, right? And so very typically with some of the other sources we looked at, you will have to pay back those funds. You will have to pay them back with interest. And you'll also have to put up maybe some collateral against that in case you default on that loan, right? So grants are non-dilutive, meaning we retain our ownership and we don't have to pay the money back. So non-equity, non-debt capital. So how does grant funding work, right? Now we know what is a grant, what is the structure of that? How does a grant actually work? How can I go and access this funding for my business, right? This is very important. We need to know, what does that process look like? So in Canada, grants are going to be earned capital that can cover between 50 to 100% of project costs. And we can dig more into this, but what I want you to take note of is that earned capital piece. So my first tip for any folks who are just getting started with grant funding is to begin to identify projects in your business that you need funding for, right? So rather than going out there and saying, okay, well, I know that the grant funding is out there, what could I be eligible for? I want you to be thinking about, okay, these are the projects in my business. Maybe I want to hire my first team member. Maybe I want to do some research and development, some market, market testing. I want you to identify those projects and then seek out a grant that is going to fit those funding requirements, right? So you can see on the screen here, I have the first thing on the list is projects, right? So identifying what is it that I need this funding for. That's step one. Now, step two is going to be actually finding that grant and that funding opportunity for that project, right? So first we're identifying the project, then we're going and finding the grant that's going to fund that project for us. And then kind of 2A, right, that the step that comes along with finding that grant is going to be applying to that grant. So we've identified our project. Now we've identified a grant and we've applied to that grant. If we are successful in securing that grant, we are going to begin to execute our project. And the important note here is that you will most likely have to have some cash today to begin to execute the project. And that's why I have the term cash up front on the screen here today. So you identify your project, you get a grant, now you're executing, and you're executing with your own capital. Now, the reason for this is that grant funding in Canada, this is most programs, not all, but most programs are going to be a reimbursement structure. So you're applying for the funds in advance of the project, but then you're actually executing with your own funds. And then as a kind of a final step 4, you're going to be reimbursed for the expenses that you've incurred. And this will be through the process of submitting documentation, expense reports, pay stubs, anything that documents, okay, this was the project, these were the expenses that I incurred. That's when you begin to receive that 50 to 100% project cost reimbursement. So kind of 4 steps, right? We're identifying our project, then we're getting the grant, then we're executing the project, and then we're reimbursed for those expenses. So that is how grant funding works. And there may be a little bit of concern about the cash up front piece, and we can definitely dig into that. But just so you know, there are ways to work around that. So you can still work with grant funding, but you don't necessarily need to have the capital yourself. You can get that from an outside source. Now I'm just checking the chat here as we had a question roll in. Do you have to be loss making or struggling to be eligible for a grant? No, not at all. You can be a thriving, growing business. And actually, it's probably better if you are a thriving, growing business. Better for you. I mean, not it doesn't really matter for the grant application. You don't have to be loss making or struggling to be eligible for a grant. Many established businesses, very large businesses, multinational companies, they also utilize grants. Grants are a great way to add to kind of your bottom line, your profit loss statement, these types of things. You can utilize grants for that, and so you don't have to be struggling. You don't have to be, in a loss capacity or anything like that to take advantage of grants. Yeah, Aditi, I'm glad that you're learning some new things today. That's really great to hear. Okay, so now I want to talk about what projects can we fund, right? Because my number one tip was identify projects in your business that you need funding for. So what projects can you fund? So the answer is many, but when it comes to looking at grants and fitting yourself into a project category, there are going to be 4 core categories of grant funding. And those 4 core categories are R&D or research and development, hiring, training, and market expansion. Now on the screen here, I have a 5th category, and that's COVID-19 recovery funding. Now, over the past several years, as we've been through the pandemic, the Canadian government and provincial governments, federal and provincial, have been providing a number of opportunities for businesses, and in this case, businesses that were struggling and were having kind of a loss in sales. And so, yes, some very specific programs with the COVID-19 recovery funds did require that. That was a special 5th category. Now, this category is and will be phasing out, but the 4 core categories, R&D, hiring, training, market expansion, those will remain. And so it's important to know these because this is going to greatly reduce the time that you're spending to seek out an eligible grant for your project, right? So if we're identifying that, we need to expand our team, we're looking to hire, of course, we're going to be looking at hiring grants in that category, right? If instead we're looking to maybe do some IP work, then we could be looking at things like market expansion or R&D. Some of these programs are able to fund, IP related work. So once we identify the project, we can kind of fit ourselves into these categories or these boxes, and this will reduce the number of programs we're looking at. And I'll show you how to do that in the Pocket platform a little bit later. But for now, definitely the 4 core categories are good to know: R&D, hiring, training, and market expansion. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions in the chat. Felicia, does Pocket work with startups based in the States? Does there have to be a Canadian tie-in? So Felicia, great question. We work with companies across North America. We serve 8,000 businesses across North America, both in Canada and the US. We are a Canadian company ourselves, and we primarily serve the Canadian market, but we do have an alpha product accessible for US companies. So if you have friends that have a US company, or if you yourself have a US company, you can definitely sign up. And then Aditi, another question here. It seems that payments to Pocketed are in USD, but grants depend on the country you live in. Yes, payments through Pocketed are in USD, given our North American coverage. And then what is market expansion? So market expansion, there are market expansion programs for both Canadian businesses and US businesses. Market expansion grants will allow you to expand your company to a new foreign market, or sometimes a new regional market within the country that you're operating in. So can export, I'll talk about this one, very common one. You can utilize this as a Canadian business to expand to a new international market and fund things like travel, market research, marketing, as well as things like IP related expenses, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, great. So you may be wondering, how much funding is available to me as a Canadian business, right? What is out there? What is the market opportunity? And you may be surprised to hear that there is $5.9 billion available annually in grant funding for your business. And this is a massive, massive amount of funds for Canadian businesses that can utilize this to grow their team and innovate more and more and really grow the economy right now. Of course, you're not going to be able to take advantage of all $5.9 billion for yourself, just become a unicorn just like that. But you can definitely leverage a large chunk of this. We have many users who have used $50, $100, $150, $200,000 in grant funding just in the past year. And here at Pocketed, our own internal team, we've leveraged $750,000, so over $750,000 in grant funding to scale our team and grow our product. So definitely there is a massive, massive market opportunity for you as long as you have the projects and the need for this funding. We have another question here from Aditi. Do startups get grants in Canada to create apps and add technology to their ideas? Definitely, they definitely do. So of course, there are a variety of companies that utilize grants and you can use them for projects just like that. Now, I have another question for you. Back to the interactive portion to make sure you're awake and soaking this all in. When do you think it is the right time to apply for grants? Now, there's no wrong answers here. I just want to hear your thoughts. And then I'll hop in and clarify and give my answer, but I'd love to hear what folks think in terms of when is it the right time to apply for grants. Okay, so we've got some folks chiming in. Felicia, all the time. Nabil, now. DT, when you foresee a need before the business starts, when you need them. Okay, this is all great. And Sean, I do see your hand up there, so we'll come back to you in just a second, but I'm just gonna hop over and give my answer. You are all correct. So if you need funding, it is time to begin to seek out that funding, right? It doesn't matter what your company stage is. You could be pre-revenue to Series D. Doesn't matter what industry you're operating in. You could be a taco food truck, and I'll give an example of this a little bit later, all the way to a deep tech, international deep tech. Doesn't matter. If you have projects, if you have desired business outcomes that you need funding for, it's the right time to see if there's a grant that will fit that need, right? Pocketed will help you look for that, and of course we'll hop into that. But you should know if you need funding, you should be considering grants as a viable option and opportunity for you to be funding your business. Now, Sean, I want to come back to you. I know you had your hand up, so if you want to go ahead and unmute, I'd be happy to take your question.
Thank you so much, Ben. You mentioned prior to this segment, economy and grant. And I wanted to find out how important is it for these grant lenders lending it to the business and your business contributing to the growth of the economy? Is there a huge factor in grant lenders and your business when they're evaluating whether or not they're going to give you the money to support your business? Are they more I'm not sure if I'm asking the question correctly, but I
Oh, you
know
are.
that the economy is crucial in regards to grant lenders, and grant lenders have to take into consideration the individual businesses that want the money. So if if your business is not contributing in a key factor to the economy, can that affect your abilities of receiving the grant?
Sean, that is an excellent question. And I definitely hear you loud and clear on that. And there's two things that I would say. I would say one, every business is contributing to the Canadian economy, right? So you're clear on that. But two, definitely understand, and I'm happy to share with you that some programs do consider some very, very specific factors when it comes to allocating those funds. And so the answer to your question is a little bit fluid because it is going to be very dependent on the actual grant you're looking at. There are over 1,000 opportunities, 1,000 different grant programs in Canada in the Pocketed database, and each one is going to be unique in the eligibility requirements. Some won't consider that at all, right? They just want to know if you have an eligible project, and if you're maybe hiring or anything like that. If you meet the eligibility on those fronts, it doesn't really necessarily matter. Whereas there are some other programs that may take into account, like the UN sustainability goals, for example, or some of the the key strategic initiatives of the Canadian government and of the US government, and they will be looking and evaluating your business on that front. So there's not exactly like a one answer, yes or no. It definitely depends on the program, and there are some programs that will look at that, and there are other programs that will not look at that.
Thank you so much, Ben.
No worries, Sean. My pleasure. Okay, so now we've kind of outlined, like, if you need funding, now's the time to look for grants, right? But we all know there's a lot of us on the call today here that maybe haven't utilized grants in the past. And this is true of a lot of Canadian founders, right? And so why is it that many Canadian founders and kind of the hundreds of Canadian founders that we talked to in our network when we were building Pocketed don't always look or leverage grant funding as much as they could be? And there's really kind of three common struggles that we uncovered. And I think that a lot of folks can resonate because we did ourselves. So number one, right, locating grants is a challenging process. As I just mentioned to Sean, there are over 1,000 opportunities across Canada, even more in the United States. And finding the program that's out there and works for us can be challenging, right? Many programs, many administrators, many rabbit holes, and we all know navigating government websites is not the most fun. So locating the grants is challenging, and that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is that requirements can sometimes be very unclear, right? Once we invest all of this time, and we have limited time as founders and entrepreneurs into finding programs that are out there, we may not actually know what are the requirements of this program, and are we eligible, right? And do we fit this program? And a really good example of this is the MyTax program. And we love the MyTax program. We work very closely with them. We're actually partners with their team. But MyTax actually intentionally, in a lot of cases, does not list all of their eligibility requirements on their website. And they're intentional. They want you to click through and read more and make sure you're engaged. Also, they have representatives that they want you to engage with. And so sometimes this can mean we're investing even more time that we don't necessarily have just to figure out if it actually works for us. Now, the third kind of key struggle that we definitely uncovered and we found that we encountered ourselves was that support is difficult to access sometimes. And we may not know that support is out there, right? So what you should know, and we'll talk more about this, is that there are professionals in the grant writing and grant consulting space. These are folks that can help advise you on what grants are best fit. There's also folks who can write the applications on your behalf. And so you may have not known that is out there, and that's very fair because a lot of folks are not familiar with this. And so if you're not familiar with it, you're not going to know exactly where to find it, right? And these were the three key struggles that we really uncovered, in kind of the run up to, hey, there's an opportunity here, and we think we should be launching a product to help with this. And so that is why we launched Pocketed, and we're going to get back into the content, but I just really at this point in the presentation wanted to highlight Pocketed for you so we can explore it later together. And so Pocketed understands the challenges of building a business and particularly getting funding for that business. And so we launched our platform as a way to make non-dilutive funding, grant funding, more accessible to you as a business owner. And so what that looks like is signing up for a free account that matches you with eligible funds. And then you can access those additional supportive resources to actually have success in securing those funds. So super quick highlight of Pocketed right there. This is a tool that I hope that you can all leverage to get some grant funding for yourselves. And we'll hop back into Pocketed in a little bit, but we're going to get back to the content before we do that. And sorry, I know that there was a hand up in the room with a question. I think it was Right Time Realty. I might be incorrect, but if you did still have that question, please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question now.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Sierra Fields. So I was asking, I'm in the US. So what if I look to do business in Canada?
So if you're looking to do business in Canada, that's a great question. It is obviously very case specific, but I can give some general advice. So one, you can look at expansion programs offered by either state-based or federal-based organizations that will allow you to expand to a new international market. The other option is that if you're starting a brand new business in Canada, so if you don't have an existing business and you're looking to launch one within the Canadian market, then in that case, you can just look at Canadian business grants, because then you'll be registering and incorporating and building a team in Canada rather than bringing your existing business into the region. So those are kind of the two options that you have, and it depends on what you're looking to do. Yeah, and then we've got one more question in the chat here from Aditi. There's no single software with filters to help us find what we need. Yeah, so I think that was brought up when I was kind of going through the different challenges, right? And so we're gonna look at Pocketed together, because Pocketed should be that single software that you can use to help find those grants that could be beneficial and eligible to you. So we'll look at that in a little bit. But what I want to do first is look at some grant myths, right? These are some things that we hear a lot of questions that we get that just aren't necessarily true. And I want to clear the air before you all start your own grant search. So the first one is that there are too many strings attached. People begin to look at grants and like, oh my gosh, I've got to do this and that, and it's too much, right? Okay, so it is true that grants have, some restrictions, right? They've got reporting requirements, which can be somewhat cumbersome. And of course, you are required to stay within the boundaries of the grant. So you can't go and get a hiring grant and then use that grant for like marketing expenses, like ad spend or something like that, right? You have to make sure you're spending it on what you said you're going to spend it on. But relatively, like when we're comparing this to the other sources of funding that are available to us, we have a lot of flexibility, right? So we have choice up front on the projects that we're working on and the projects that we're accessing funding for, right? We're not held accountable by investing third parties who are expecting a return on their capital or an increase, with interest to payback structure. You're also not obligated to spend all or any of the funds that you're approved for if you don't have an eligible use, right? So very quickly, we can see that we have a lot of flexibility when it does come to grants, as long as we're aware of, okay, we have to stay within the lines of this is the funding and this is what we're using it for. But outside of that, we have a lot of flexibility, upfront choice, as well as once we get that grant, what we're kind of doing with it in terms of we don't have to spend it and we're not held accountable by somebody who's saying, look, I'm expecting a 30% return on this investment. What's happening here? So grants, yes, there are some strings attached, but really a flexible option in comparison to a lot of the other options that are out there. Sean, I'll come to you in just one sec. The next myth that we hear quite often is that if I'm not in tech, there are no grants for me. This is a big misconception when it comes to grant funding. A lot of folks are like, well, I haven't really looked before because I don't have a technical business and I don't think there's going to be grant funding for me. So number one, this is false. There is grant funding for a lot of different industries outside of tech, agriculture, arts and culture, nonprofit. There are grants for all of these industries. And so there will be something out there for you. Now, the other thing that you should know is that just because you're not in tech does not mean that you can't get technical funding. And I'm going to use a very specific example, which I hinted at earlier, and it's a taco food truck. So here at Pocketed, we have over 8,000 businesses on our platform. There's a wide range of business types, right? We've got food trucks, we've got, as I said, large multinational companies. The taco food truck was looking to basically digitize their business, build out an e-commerce platform, revamp their website, to kind of keep up with the times, especially after the impacts of COVID-19. And so we said to them, look, you can actually access technical grant funding for this project, even though you're not even relatively close to being a technical company. You're a food truck, right? You're in the food industry and you're an independent business. And they were like, well, I really don't think that I'm eligible for this up front. But we were actually able to successfully secure them a technical funding grant because the requirements of that technical grant were that it was hiring for a technical role. So it did not have to be a tech company. The business being non-tech was still able to create a job in a technology role, right? A tech role in a non-tech company. And so they were able to leverage technical funding as a non-tech business. And so I think that's a really, really great example of how you can be flexible in these funds, and how if at first glance it doesn't look like it's eligible to you, it may actually work as long as you know how to position yourself in the right way. And I mean, taco food truck, that is like the polar opposite of a tech business. So definitely a really good example there. And so the last myth that I want to cover, and then Sean will come to your question. If I don't have cash today, I can't use a grant, right? And so we talked about that cash upfront requirement. This is not true, and there are ways to work around that. Now, the ways that you can work around that are through what we call grant-based financing. So grant-based financing, you'll be working with more traditional lenders, but they're working on a special structure. They're working specifically to fund your grant needs. So they know you're accessing grant funding. They know what the structure of that grant funding is. They know the program that you've hopefully secured. They'll be able to provide you basically microloans to help fund that cash upfront requirement. And then they'll have shorter payment terms and these types of things to accommodate for the reimbursement structure of the grant. So if you don't have that cash upfront, definitely still utilize grant funding. You just have to make sure that you're utilizing these supportive services such as grant-based financing. Okay, so that is all of the myths. Now, Sean, I want to let you unmute yourself and ask your questions so we can address that before we hop into funding opportunities.
Yeah, my question is regarding the repercussions of a person who's receiving the grant and its impact on the economy, or is there repercussions when a business has either fell or failed to abide by the grants directly towards the economy? The reason why I'm asking that is because the businesses that we operate inside of Canada contributes to the economy, and I don't sometimes see the contributions that my company makes to the economy. It just seems like I'm doing all of these things individually on my own, right? And I want to know through the process of the grants that I receive, and if there's like I did something wrong with the business, or how much of an impact does my business have to the economy, and the impacts that it can cause for other businesses that are receiving grants future if I do some faultiness. Is there, I think I don't know if that's, yeah.
So the grants that are going to be considering, sorry, frog in my throat. The grants that are going to be considering your economic impact are primarily going to be like very, very large grants. And so when you're at the point that you're ready to secure those grants, I would say your business is definitely going to be set up to be, correctly measuring and monitoring those impacts, right? So as a smaller business, I would say you wouldn't necessarily be in a situation where you would be, making a fault that may, negatively impact others, or the requirements of the grants. What I want you to know is that definitely, there is sometimes some concern, like, okay, if I access this, $50,000 grant and I don't spend any of it, and then so maybe I'm not maximizing my potential, to contribute to the economy or whatever that project may be. A grant funding, administrator will not penalize you for that. They will still consider, your future applications, and they won't, other grant administrators won't blacklist you if you don't use 100% of the funds. As I said, right, with a lot of the grant funding programs that are out there, you're not held, as accountable as other funding sources like VCs or angel investors or those types of things. So I would say definitely, again, there's going to be some case specific considerations, but as a general rule of thumb, I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Okay, so I know that my question that I'm asking is not really focused on grants per se. I was trying to like merge grants into the question. I think it's
Sure.
really based off of how much of the contribution does. Is there a way for to find out the contributions that I make after receiving a grant from towards the economy? Is there a way for business to be able to address or see the contributions that they've made to the economy, other than just locally through individual sales or to the customers that are coming in and out? That would be the only way that I know that I could address that I've made some type of contributions towards
Sure.
I guess individual people in the community, right? But nonetheless, like I said, I appreciated the answer, but I think because it is more of a economy question, I guess, as opposed to a grants question, I'm not sure if it's, but thank you anyways.
Yeah, sure, no worries, Sean. Happy to connect with you after the call today as well if you want to continue this conversation. But I think just for the sake of timing, we're going to move on today and talk about these funding opportunities here. So really quickly, I just want to highlight 3 funding names that you can take note of and you can look back upon, even if they're not eligible for you today. So the first one is going to be an example of a hiring grant. This is the DS4Y, or Digital Skills for Youth hiring opportunity. And this is to fund technical roles and technical skills training for youth in Canada, so folks under 30. Now, this one is offering 100% coverage of hiring expenses, basically up to $32,000. A portion of that is going to be for training. So Digital Skills for Youth, DS4Y, a really good one to make note of. The second one is an example of an expansion grant, and this is going to be the Can Export SMEs program. So this is going to help you expand to new international markets as a Canadian business. And this actually provides you $50,000 at a 50% coverage rate to help fund things like, incorporation in a foreign market, travel expenses, marketing expenses, these types of things can be funded through a program like Can Export SMEs. And the final one here, as an example of an R&D tax credit, is going to be the SHRED tax credit program, so the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program. This offers you up to 35% back on eligible expenses, R&D work in Canada. So really quickly, just kind of flying through those, we've got the DS4Y, Digital Skills for Youth, the Can Export SMEs program, and then finally the SHRED tax credit program. And so while these may not be specific or eligible to your business today, I just wanted to really quickly highlight those names in case you see them in the future, or you do want to look into them on your own, as I've identified them as fantastic programs for all Canadian businesses if you do meet eligibility requirements. Okay, great. So now I'm going to hop into securing funds. So what are my tips to apply successfully? Now, my first tip for you is going to be really preparing your organization for success. And there are a few things that kind of come into this. So the first thing is there's some basic business info that you are going to need across pretty much every single application that you're submitting. And this basic business info is going to be things like your business number from the CRA, a brief company description, very short, pitchy description of your company address, contact info, incorporation date. Looking at these different categories on our screen, we can all tell this is very, very basic business info, but you're going to need this every single time. And especially if it's not you who's applying, it may be hard for somebody on your team or a grant writer to pull together this information without bugging you and wasting more of your valuable time, right? So my recommendation is to create a centralized document. You can title it, grant writing, grant applications, whatever you want, and keep all of that basic business info in there, right? Keep it easily accessible. So in the future, you can just access that and reuse it and repurpose it very quickly. The other cool thing about this is that, of course, then you can add more and more notes as you begin to apply for more and more applications. Now, this has been my recommendation for a long time. Create a centralized doc. I have a really cool update to give. Pocketed is actually launching our own tool, Application Intelligence, and it is going to do all of this for you. So if you're like, okay, I don't want to add one more thing to my list, we're actually going to help you out with this very, very soon. This is actually launching next week. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But I just wanted to highlight that regardless, it's good to have this information centralized. Now, my second tip is going to be positioning your organization. And this really comes back to kind of our role versus organization conversation, the taco food truck conversation, the type of project that you're applying to. Eligibility can vary a lot. Different programs have different eligibility requirements, and each can be somewhat flexible if you know how to position your organization in the right way. And you can definitely position your organization and write the application in a certain manner that is going to increase or improve your chances of success, right? And this can really come down to a lot of nuances in the type of writing, and it can be very specific or somewhat general. It can be tricky to learn how to do this the right way, and that's why there are professionals in this space that can help you do that, for you if you're novice or if you're brand new to it. But positioning your organization is an important consideration when applying to grants to improve your chances, of succeeding and securing those funds. And again, this has really come down to language, looking at the role, looking at your capacity internally, and considering all of those things to put together a really, really strong application. So 2 very simple tips, but very important: preparing your organization, having that information ready, and then of course positioning your organization around eligibility requirements and anything else along those lines. Okay, great. So we have some more questions. I'm going to save them for the end. What I want to do now is take a look at Pocketed together. So we've talked a lot about grant funding. What is it? Now we understand what it is. We understand what's out there. We understand kind of the different types that we can take advantage of. So how can we make this easier, right? Pocketed is what is going to make it easier. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat right now. Given our relationship, our partnership with Edge, we have a special link for all of you that is going to help you sign up for a free account and then get access to additional resources at a discounted rate. So I'm going to throw the link in the chat. I'm going to pull up the platform itself and we're going to look at it together really quickly. So that's the link. If you click on that link, it'll take you to sign up for a free account. And then it'll also apply the special Edge code to your account so that if you do choose to upgrade to paid services, you will get a special discount on that. But I'm going to show you the platform here. We're going to look at it together. So when you first come to Pocketed and you click on that link, the first thing you're going to do is create a business profile. So you're going to fill in some details about your business, and that's going to allow the Pocketed platform to match you with eligible opportunities that you can then take advantage of. So I've already set up that business profile. When I log in for the first time, this is what I'm going to see: a few quick links to things that I can do. And the first thing I'm going to want to do, and I'm going to want to do this every single time I log into Pocketed, is click on Explore Grants. And this is going to take us to our grants dashboard. So we're going to be able to see, hey, what are the programs that we are actually eligible for? And so for my program, or sorry, for my business, my account that I've set up, I have 176 matches. So, as we'll remember, I mentioned earlier, there's over 1,000 programs in the database. I've matched with 176 of those programs. So obviously I'm very excited about that, right? That's a lot of opportunity for me to take advantage of. But how do I narrow that down, right? So to narrow this list down, there's a few things we can do. We can hop right into our sort filters. We can search for specific programs like the ones we talked about today. The good stuff is in the All Filters tab. And this is where we can see those 4 core categories of grants that we spoke about earlier. So if I've identified a hiring project in my business, I want to expand the team, all I have to do is come into Pocketed after creating my free account, log in, come to my grants dashboard, click on hiring, and right away, our list is reduced down to now 63 programs that are specific to our business and specific to the project that we're running. Now, there's further filters beyond that to make it even more specific. So if we wanted to look at just tax credits, we click on this and we can see there are 3 tax credits that are available to me to help with hiring expenses. So very quickly, we can reduce it down to a very actionable list that we can utilize then to apply for grants on our own. And so what that looks like, and I'm just going to quickly reset this so we can see a larger list and look at grants. If we click into any single one of these programs, we're going to see a ton of information on it. So we'll see how much funding is it? What's the deadline? What are the eligibility requirements? And if we're confident this is right for us, we can click on apply, submit our application, and then of course, see if we are approved or not. And so to do all this, to sign up for Pocketed, access the information you're seeing on the screen, and use some basic filters, no cost associated with that. We are a free resource, a free tool for North American businesses to find grant funding that works for them. Now, if you want to access additional supportive resources, so the grant consultants we talked about, the grant writers that we talked about, if you don't want to write the application yourself, that is where payment comes into play. And so if you'd like to engage with a grant writer, you click on this, that'll connect you with the team. And then in that case, you'd be paying the grant writer for that engagement. The other option that we do have is our Pocketed Plus version of the platform. This will give you access to more features, including advanced filters, so things beyond funding type, notifications, and our new tools that are launching next week. And so those new tools are going to include our application intelligence, as well as our keyword research tools. So if you're looking for more support on actually applying to grants on your own, these are going to be some really, really, really useful tools for you. What they're going to do is they're going to seek out the best language, the best phrases, the best keywords for you to use when you're applying to grants. And then they'll also store information from your current applications that you're processing, so that in the future you can provide that information faster. You can put these applications, stronger applications together more quickly. And so you can upgrade to Pocketed Plus within the platform right here if you use the code EDGE, which is going to be included on your account, and then you can add it again at checkout. You're going to be able to lock in all those additional features. And so I have a tip for all of you. If you'd like to access a really, really, really cheap version of Pocketed Plus today, I would say definitely sign up before Friday. Right now, the cost for Pocketed Plus, and it's an annual membership, it's $185 before the discount. With the EDGE code, you get a 25% discount, so that saves you about $50. So you'll be paying about $125, $135 US. And if you lock in the pricing, I'm telling you now, there's going to be a price jump next week when we launch Pocketed Plus 2.0. And so you will have the cheaper pricing locked in for the next year. So if you're interested in that upgraded version, definitely use your code EDGE and lock that in. But if you'd rather just sign up for the free account, definitely, by all means, just sign up for the free account. We'd rather have you on there and finding this grant information for yourself, rather than kind of avoiding Pocketed and missing out on an opportunity to fund your business. So I'm just going to throw this back up on the screen here. We're going to hop into some Q&A, but I know we're just approaching our end time. So I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone for joining me today to learn more about grant funding, to learn a little bit more about Pocket as a tool. And of course, I want to thank Erica, Noreen, and Marisol, and of course, the rest of the EDGE team for inviting me here today to speak with all of you and share a little bit more about the knowledge that I have in this space. So thank you. I do encourage you to create your free Pocketed account at the link that I've shared in the chat. We'll share that again after the session. You can also reach out to us. We have a live chat, a chat bot, and many other ways to get in touch with the team. So thank you all. I'll stick around for a few last questions, but we'll see you on the platform very soon. Great. Okay, so yeah, I am sticking around. I'm just going to see if there's any more questions in the chat that haven't been addressed. But yeah, folks who are kind of just still on the call, feel free to hop off, and I'll just go through this here. And Noreen and Erica and of course Marisol, please hop in, of course, if you have any comments as well. But okay, cool. So Stephanie had a question, and Stephanie, and okay, maybe Stephanie and DT, I see you have your hands up. So why don't we actually just go to you live, and then I know you have some questions in the chat, but we'll just kind of address what you have to ask live here. So Stephanie, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Can you just speak a little bit more about how long a company description should be and what you would recommend including in the company description? Yeah, so that is a great question. I would say a company description should be short, no longer than maybe 5 to 6 sentences, even maybe a little bit shorter. We want it to be pitchy. We want it to be punchy. We want it to just include, the most relevant information. It's basically like a sales pitch, right? We want to make sure that our business is, attractive to the grant administrator, especially if it's, being evaluated in comparison to other businesses. And then the only other tip that I would give would be sometimes you might want to change a little bit of the language to match what the grant is asking for. So if it's like a sustainability grant, you definitely want to include some keywords and some key phrases that talk about sustainability, right? And you may not want to include that for all of your company descriptions, but you may alter it slightly for each. And that's where like the keyword tool is really going to come into play, because it will identify that for you, in your grant, search process. So that's what I would recommend. And of course, grant writers as well,
will definitely have their own recommendations. And I'm not a grant writer, but as somebody who works in the space, that would be my recommendation.
And then do you also have further discounts for nonprofits?
So we don't have any like unique or special discounts for nonprofits that are different from what we have with Edge. So all folks that are coming through the Edge community would just have access to the 25% off Pocket Plus, which is the upgraded version of the platform, 50% off grant consultations. And then there's one more, which is slipping my mind, and I'm so sorry. There's a third benefit, but those are the two most important. Definitely the discount on Pocket Plus and the consultations.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Stephanie. Have a great evening. Okay, Aditi, we will go over to you now.
Thank you, Ben. This was extremely insightful. The platform looks really exactly, I think, what we need. Would it be okay if you could go back to it, because my questions are linked to some of the filters that you showed us?
Yeah, I'll hop right back into it. I still have it up here, so let me just switch over. Okay, there we go. So we're back in. I'll just go to the grants and we'll go to the filters here.
Yeah, so I'm just confused about, like, one of the things I had mentioned in the chat was, do you have maybe a video, like a buyer's guide where people could understand how to navigate this? Because when I was looking at it, I said, okay, for a startup that wants to create, some kind of software, how do you navigate these filters on the right? How do you figure that out? So of course, cash up and all that, you definitely need to have that ready. But how do you navigate this specifically for a startup that wants to develop some kind, maybe consider like an app or something?
Yeah, so that is an excellent question. So the first thing I'll say is we do have some video resources that kind of help walk you through some aspects of the platform. And so I can look at sharing some of those with the Edge team after today to share with you. Now, what I want to say, just specifically your questions while we're here today together about the filters, is the first thing to kind of recognize is that the grants that are in this list will already have gone through a step one filtering process based on the business profile you build. So we can actually access our business or grant profile in account settings, and we can see some of these fields. But when you sign up on day one, you're going to be filling in a few things. So you're going to be filling in a bit of information on your business. You're going to be filling in what are kind of the projects that you're looking at applying to. What is the size of your company? And so the grants that you're seeing in the list will have already gone through kind of that step one filtration process, so that you're seeing programs that are eligible to your business. And then for the grants, or sort of the filters that are actually on the grants dashboard, that's actually a really good question that you asked, because we've had folks in the past say, look, the filters there are great. I'm still having a bit of a hard time navigating through these and seeing what's really right for like what I'm doing. And so another kind of insider sneak peek is that something that we're building on the back end is a more intuitive filtering process, where rather than looking at these different things like the categories and the candidate requirements and these types of things, instead you'll just see more actionable language, like what you just said, right? You're building technology for an app. You'll see things like that you can then click through, rather than looking at filters like this. So for the time being, I would say utilize the existing filters to the best of your abilities. There's a lot of different ones here that you can use in combination to find something that'll work best for you. And then keep your eye out, because we're a small, startup company. Well, we're a growing company, 20 employees, but definitely we're always trying to build new tools that help you in your grant funding needs. So I would say, use these to the best of your ability. Keep your eye out for those new kind of workflows that were coming soon. And we're always open to user feedback. So definitely keep in touch and let us know if it's working for you.
So these, I just wanted to have this one last explanation on candidate requirements. So candidate requirements is only if you are hiring, or this is for us, because right now and also are there definitions of this? So new immigrant is up to how many years? And so the way you've explained, recent grad is within 2 years.
Yeah.
So youth is it under 30 and
Yeah. So to answer step one of your question there, So the candidate requirements is specifically for hiring. And so these are the advanced filters, part of Pocketed Plus. And so if we switch it to like market expansion, we're going to get completely different filters here, right? And so we're looking at project activities and these types of things. And training, there's no additional ones. So that'll change depending on what grant type you're looking at. Now that's actually a good point that you raised there. With some of the things like new immigrant, it could actually be better defined. So that's a great piece of feedback while we're on here on the call today. But new immigrant would typically be within the last 5 years of coming to Canada.
Okay, and just for the market expansion, is there a dual filter where you have startups and market expansion? So you see grants which are specifically for startups? That was my last sort of confusion,
Yeah, so the market expansion, you could be a startup or a scale up that is expanding to an international market potentially. As I said, so that your question was startups and filtering for that, that'll already be filtered in step one with your grant profile, because in this one, you're going to be putting in like your company size and those types of things. So that'll be accounted for already.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Ben. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Okay, Felicia, I think we're going to close out the session with you today. You can go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Hey, this has been really great. So I have two questions because I found out about a really big grant program around apprenticeships earlier this year, but I didn't have enough time to prepare for it. And so my first question is, I'm curious as to what some of the trends are in grants. Like, are there certain areas that you're seeing a lot more grants coming down the pipeline for? And then my second question is, when I was looking at an application before, sometimes it was requiring businesses to partner with like maybe educational institutions or workforce agencies and things like that. And so I'm just curious if you guys ever provide, any support connecting those dots.
Yes. So first, to answer your question about trends, I would say the biggest trend right now that I've been taking note of, and that the team has been noticing kind of in the grant funding space, is that grants have been very popular over the past several years. There was a lot of, I think, awareness raised around grants during the pandemic as folks became more aware of this as a funding source for them. And so a lot of the programs that are offering funding and support are actually working through kind of a backlog list of folks that have applied in the past who they weren't able to allocate funding to. So when you're applying to grants today, it will be a little bit more competitive as there are more applicants and also a backlog of historical applicants that they're evaluating your application next to. So that means that, we as business owners must be more conscious and more active in applying to funds, when they become available as quickly as we can to get our name out there. And additionally, really curating strong applications and if it's necessary, working with professionals to do that, so we can ensure our chances of competition. So that would be kind of my biggest recommendation right now. One of the trends that we're definitely seeing when it comes to grant funding. Now, to answer your second question, and sorry, I've just been talking and now I've forgotten exactly what you asked. Could you just clarify again what the second piece of your question was?
Yeah, when I was looking at applying for a grant before, it was like a pre-apprenticeship category, and it said that if you were like a for-profit business, you needed to partner with educational or workforce agency. So I was just curious if any of the, grant programs you all saw required those types of partnerships, and if you guys like play a role in any of that.
Yeah. So yeah, great question. I remembered it as soon as you started talking about it. So yes, so as Noreen actually mentioned when we kicked off the session today, we have partnerships with 170 folks across North America. These are accelerators, these are incubators, these are chambers of commerce, these are also businesses. We have relationships with schools. And so there are programs like My Tax is one, which typically requires you to have a partner institution to be working with, maybe a research facility or something like this. So we can support with that. We do have connections, a lot of connections in the space. And so if you need support, then I would say, yes, we can help. And all you have to do is reach out and ask, and then we can help to facilitate those introductions. So we definitely have a lot of touch points, a lot of connections across the industry. And so, when you are coming across a program like MyTax that needs that introduction, we can definitely help with facilitating that.
Got it. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so I think that clears up all the questions from the raised hands. One last question: where can we find a list of the 170 programs you have connections with? Stephanie, great question. On our website, we have a partnerships page. You can see some folks on that list right now. We're going to be launching like a click out page from the partnerships page, and there you'll be able to see all of them. That's not live yet. But if you go to the partnerships page today, you can see some of those folks. If you go to my LinkedIn too, you'll see a lot of the people that I'm connected with are part of those networks. So you could, of course, if you want, you can hack my LinkedIn network as well. Okay, great. So I think that wraps up our session today. I see a lot of you have stuck around to the end. So thanks for taking the extra time out of your evening to listen to everyone's questions and hear my answers. Thank you once again to everyone who joined the call today. We'll definitely send you out a link if you haven't signed up already. And we'll see all of you very soon on the Pocket platform. Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ben, from everyone.
Thanks, Noreen.
Take care.